Hey everyone, Kevin here with Victory 4x4. Today I'm going to walk you through the install of our 3rd gen 4Runner roof rack. Alright, so for the first step here, we got to get this old factory stuff out of the way. The first step in getting this off is we got 5 thumb wheels along each side here that you just need to go ahead and loosen up. I already went ahead and did it on the other side, just so that we could show you here that allows you to move each of these crossbars. Same thing on the front. We'll loosen these up. And that'll allow you to slide each of these rails, exposing all the screws holding down each of these side rails underneath. Now on these 3 center crossbars, the screws holding these down are pretty short. So the easiest thing there is just to loosen those all the way up, and we'll get them out of the way and set them to the side for now. With those out of the way, you can position these main front and rear crossbars in a way that allows you to access all 5 of these T25 screw heads along each side, and then using a T25 socket and a ratchet or an impact in this case, go ahead and remove all 5 of those screws. Then, after you have all of those removed, just go ahead and tighten the thumb wheels back up on these main crossbars so that they're not sliding all over the place. And then you can just pick this entire assembly off the roof of the vehicle. Now once you have that rack removed, it's going to be a good idea to come back in here with some sort of cleaner and a rag and just wipe down the area where it used to sit on the roof to remove any light dirt and debris, something like that that might be stuck down there, because we are going to have to seal against this surface when we install our new brackets. Now if your vehicle is still equipped with any of these little clips that would be placed on all 4 corners of this rack assembly, you'll want to remove them at this point so that we can seal around that hole. Alright, so at this point we need to begin assembling the rack. In order to do that, we kind of start by laying everything out, making sure it's all here. So you've got your 7 crossbars, your front and rear fairings, as well as both side rails. And then you've got a couple smaller things that we don't need right away, but it's going to be your front mounts, your front and rear edge trim, as well as some adhesive that we'll use on these later. So to get started with this, you're simply going to take your side rail and your crossbars, noting on these crossbars that we cut a couple slots in one end of these bars. You want to make sure that those are facing up, as well as typically to the driver's side, but just make sure at least they're all in the same direction. And then you can stand this rail up on its side, and using the provided 1/4 inch hardware, as well as a little bit of anti-seize, you can get one of these crossbars started in these longer slots on the side. Once you have both of those bolts started, take a 5/32 hex socket or T-handle, something along those lines, and just lightly snug those up to hold it in place for now. Now we'll just go all the way down one side rail and install all 7 crossbars, and then jump to the other side and do the same thing all over again. Alright, so now that we have all the crossbars installed, we can start working on this front fairing. Before we can install this to the rack, you're going to want to put on the edge trim that comes provided with it. Now we've already went ahead and cut this piece down, but just go ahead and measure it out to about 36 inches and cut that using like a pair of tin snips or some good side cutters. You should be able to get through that. Just note that there is a little bit of aluminum inside of here, and when you cut it, if there are any burrs of any kind hanging out the side, you should be able to grab a hold of that with either your fingers or a pair of pliers and pick that out just to make sure it doesn't scratch anything. Once you have that cut, you'll just kind of want to center it on your front fairing, and then you can take one edge and begin pushing it on, just working all the way across from one side to the other. Alright, now at this point, using the same 1/4 inch bolts that you installed the crossbars with, you can take your fairing, place it up between these 2 side rails, and then line up the 3 holes going along each side. You can install that bolt through the slot, and then this time you'll simply back it up with this serrated flange nut. All right, now your rear fairing is going to install essentially the same way The only thing that's really different is this edge trim. So for that, you're just going to take the excess from when you cut the front portion. You'll cut it right down the middle, which will leave you with these about 5-inch long strips. And then you'll place each of these about 1 inch in from the points on the end of this fairing, and then work that up into place. So when you're done, you'll wind up with something that looks about like that, and then you'll just install it the same as the front. So to prep your front mounts for installation, you're going to want to use the provided 3M double-sided tape. And as you can kind of see the profile of the mount here, all we're looking to do is put a strip the full length of this surface along the bottom edge of the mount right there, and bring it out just far enough that it protects the edge of this radius as well as it goes down against the roof. As you can kind of see, I've already done one here, and we just leave that bottom side on until we install this mount. Now your mid and rear mounts for the rack are going to look just like this, and they're going to be mirrored parts. So on the driver's side here, you're going to install it just like this with the side mount holes toward the rear. And up here on the mid mount, those side mount holes go toward the front of the vehicle. Okay, so to get these installed, here we're working on the mid mount on the driver's side. You'll simply take a little bit of RTV and put a nice little bead around each of these holes. Now you don't have to go crazy here, but you do want to get an adequate amount so that you get a good seal without making a giant mess. So once you have the RTV in place around those holes, you'll simply take your bracket, kind of line it up where it's going to sit, and lightly sit that down in place. Once you know you got it lined up, go ahead and take just a little bit more RTV and actually fill that in so that your bolt has to pass through the silicone to really get a good seal here when you tighten this down. Then install the provided 6mm button head bolt with a washer. Okay, and then once you have both of these bolts started, we're not going to tighten this all the way down yet, but we do want to snug it up so that it holds this bracket kind of square and in place where it's going to go. So using a 4mm Allen socket, I'll kind of just lightly tighten these up. And I'm going to kind of stop right there. As you can see, I can still wiggle this bracket around just enough so that we can get the rack set down over top of it. Now once you have both those brackets installed, you'll notice that this center hole is still left open. So for that, you're just going to take one of the same 6mm bolts that you're using out here, just this time with a larger washer installed, and do essentially the same thing. So I'm going to put a ring of RTV around this hole. You don't have to use quite as much here, and then just a little bit to fill the hole so that the bolt will pass through it. I'll start it by hand. And then you can simply tighten this one all the way down and wipe up any excess. All right, now with our rack fully assembled, I'm going to grab the help of a friend and set it up there on the roof, and then we'll just loosely begin installing the bolts into our mid and rear mounts. All right, so now that we have the rack up here on the roof and all the bolts loosely installed into these mid and rear mount brackets, we'll want to go back and tighten these down to the roof. After that, just make sure that your rack is level from front to rear, and then you can tighten the side rail to these mounts. Next, we're going to install our front mounts. Now, in order to do this, you can see you got the adhesive that you installed earlier. I'm going to kind of dry fit this just to show you what's going on here. Now you'll slide it behind this side rail, and then essentially you'll want to line the slots up with these two outer holes, while making sure that it slips into place behind this door seal. Now at this time, you are going to have the backer off of this adhesive, so you're not going to want to push that all the way down tight to the roof until you know you're lined up with these two holes. And then if you're comfortable holding it up here and getting the nuts on the backside, you can do that right now, or you can simply push straight down, again with that backer removed, and then apply a little bit of firm pressure and secure that lightly in place. And then with it in place, then install your 1/4" button head bolts with the flange lock nuts on the back. So now I'll remove this, pull the backer, and then do just that. Now with those mounts loosely in place on both the driver and passenger side, what we're going to recommend you do is simply come in here, again minding your gap all the way along the roof line, and apply some upward pressure before tightening these up. And that kind of allows the mid mount and a little bit of the rear mount as well to keep some downward pressure on this front mount to help hold it in place. Next, you can come up here to your front fairing and loosen up all the bolts on both sides essentially. And then all you're going to do is push that down just to apply a little bit of pressure here to the roof and reduce any wind noise that you might run into. With that pushed down tight, go ahead and tighten these 3 bolts. Then just go over to the other side, check that everything looks nice and even, tighten those down as well. Now when you're installing these front and rear fairings, we do recommend getting yourself some 3M paint protective film and just installing that under this seal on top of your paint anywhere that this might come in contact with it. And that's just going to protect your paint over time from any like small rocks or dust or debris that might get stuck underneath there. All right, now with both sides tight, you can go ahead and do the same thing in the rear, just being sure to use that paint protective film under each piece of your edge trim. Now if you guys have any questions at all about this product or any other Victory 4x4 products, feel free to reach out to us. Give us a phone call, 269-459-8447, or email us, info@victory4x4.com.